So yeah, I'm Tom Walsh. I'm a former student of Mike Tracy, actually. Back in 1981, when I was in high school, we moved to Louisville, Kentucky. And I started taking saxophone lessons with Mike Tracy, and the rest is history. But no, he really set me on a good path, and I'm very grateful for the foundation that he created for me, and you know, kind of opening up windows into the world of jazz that I probably would not have otherwise discovered. I kind of have a loose idea about what I'm talking about today, but I didn't create like a really detailed outline, which sort of fits into what my idea was. So my idea was, the topic I kind of settled on, or the title for it, was freedom and discipline in practice, freedom and discipline in practice and performance. And this came to me, you know, because it's a big part of what we sort of work with when we're thinking about improvisation. You know, we think of improvisation as being a free expression. People often identify jazz with freedom of expression, that kind of a thing. And then we also know that there's discipline in terms of how we work on things, how we develop our skills and whatnot. And I'm going to throw out another idea, which is something I've really been thinking about a lot lately, just in terms of what does it mean to improvise, or what does it mean to learn to improvise, or what does it mean to develop your skill at improvisation, because that's what we're all interested in. It's like we enjoy doing this thing and we want to get better at it, and what is it? How do you do that? And I've summarized it very succinctly as, when we improvise, and to be able to improvise, we need to be able to play ideas, and we need to be able to develop ideas. And I think that can provide a good reference point when we are trying to decide, you know, what am I going to work on? What do I need to work on? And if you come back to this and recognize, okay, well, you know, what is it that we're doing? There's so much information nowadays. It's just crazy. I mean, in the old days, and I think we all remember the old days, you know, where it was, information was precious. It was kind of scarce in a way. You know, you wanted to find out about something, you either had to find somebody who knew about it, you had to find a book about it, you had to, you know, somehow, a lot of times you had to, you know, put some energy into getting that information, right? And nowadays, we're just inundated and we're swimming in information. There's too much information. And I think a big challenge in working on improvising or working on jazz in general is, a lot of times we have too much information, right? It's like we're always, and it's sort of a human, human nature thing, where it's like we're always looking for more information because we think somehow we're going to get that magic bit of information that's going to all of a sudden transform everything, you know. And it used to be like, oh, I'm going to buy this book, and this book has all the secrets in it, and then I'm going to, you know, that's going to be it. Of course, you buy the book, you look at it, you're like, oh, this stuff is great. And then there's another book, and then you buy that book, and then, you know, pretty soon you have a whole bookshelf full of books, right? And then you're like, oh, I never did really work with the stuff that's in that book. That's fine. I mean, I think if you come back around to, all right, it's about being able to play ideas and develop ideas. That can inform your development. And you don't have to feel guilty about, like, well, I didn't ever really learn that thing about the pentatonic scale, you know, whatever it was. It's like, okay, fine, but it's always start where you are. Like, where am I right now, and where can I go with this? And if going from this point of view of, okay, I'm trying to learn ideas and learn how to develop ideas, then you can have sort of an anchor point that you can work out from. So I want to talk a little bit about my own development and how I sort of structured a practice routine at a really crucial time in my life, and then describe how that has evolved over the years, because I'm a very detailed thinker, and not everybody is. Like, I drive some people crazy. Alan could tell you, he's been in my combos multiple times, and he's like, it's like, too much information. Okay, good. But and there was a point in my life, and it was when I was an undergraduate in college, I had certain fundamentals that I'd learned, and I sort of had the information that I needed, but I really had to develop a practice routine that was going to serve me well. And I went on this quest where I would ask different people, like, hey, what should I be doing? What's a good practice routine? And ultimately, I developed a practice routine for myself that really helped me over a period of a few years elevate my playing. And so I'll tell you, kind of what that practice routine was, and then some methodologies I used. But then I'm gonna bring it around to something that hopefully is not as complicated as what I actually did, because you don't need complicated. But so, on my instrument, I kind of was like, okay, well, I need to work on my sound every day, so I would start with working on sound, tone production, make sure I've got that foundation there. Then I would work on technique, so I would work on scales and arpeggios, those kinds of things, scale patterns. Then my next category was vocabulary, okay? Which applies to everybody, whether you're a drummer or a bass player, piano player. We're all needing to develop our vocabulary, and I'll talk more about what that was for me. And then another category for me was learning tunes, of course. So I wanted to develop a repertoire and have something that I could play over if I got together with some people, and we didn't know each other, but we could play some music together. And then, of course, transcribing solos. And I think Shelley's going to do something on transcription this week, so I won't really talk too deeply about that. There are other categories. Like, I literally set up these categories for myself, and I sat down, pencil and paper, and I wrote out, like, okay, well, what do I want to work on for sound? Okay, I want to, here's what I want to achieve in terms of what kind of sound I want to have. I had certain players that I listened to a lot, that I studied. I play alto and tenor, and soprano and baritone for that matter. I'm kind of like there's two different kinds of people in the world. There are those who like really focus, and there are these people who are like jazz tenor. That's all they do. They don't play clarinet, they don't play flute, they don't play, it's just jazz tenor. And then there are people like me where I'm like jack of all trades. I studied classical saxophone very deeply. I play piano, enough to accompany my students. I've done Broadway show playing. I've played lead alto in big bands. I've been the tenor guy in the jazz combo, but I've also played with the Louisville Orchestra, and I've done classical recitals and all these different things. I enjoy that. I enjoy doing a lot of other, different things. Not everybody's like that. Some people are really focused, one thing. Okay, so I got to come back to where was my thread? Why did I start talking about alto and tenor? I know, I was in the practice routine. After sound, I was talking about technique and whatever. But okay, I'll figure out why I was talking about alto and tenor and all the rest of it. So, yeah, I really lost that one. Okay. Transcription, yeah. Repertoire. Well, so there were other categories. Maybe that was the thing. I mean, there were other categories. So, sight reading was important to me, to work on sight reading. Ear training. You can come up with other categories. But I was talking about making lists of things, like what kind of sound do I want to have. There, I picked up the thread again. So I had alto players that I enjoyed listening to, like Cannonball Adderley and Charlie Parker, and eventually I got into Johnny Hodges, and then maybe more contemporary players. But like Kenny Garrett came out when I was at a certain age where I didn't end up copying Kenny Garrett. A lot of people after me, all the alto players copied Kenny Garrett, right? But for me, I stopped before Kenny Garrett, so he wasn't one of the people I imitated. And with tenor, it was, the obvious people like John Coltrane, Sonny Rollins, Joe Henderson, a little bit of Lester Young, some Ben Webster, Wayne Shorter, etc. And I would use, thinking about what sound do I want, okay? And how do I want to, and I sort of formed that ideal in my mind, so when I'm practicing sound, I'm going after that sound. Okay. Then with technique, I had a certain ideal in mind, which was I want to have quote-unquote virtuoso technique, right? And so I set this goal for myself with technical things, patterns, scales, and I was like, I think there in the Charlie Parker Omni book, there's one of the transcriptions that said quarter note equals 400. I can't remember if that's true or not, but I thought it was true. It might not be true even. Maybe it's 380. Whatever it was, I thought, okay, I should be able to play my scales at 400, right? So that became a goal that I set for myself. And then in terms of vocabulary, there were certain goals, which I could get into more. That's going to get way down in the weeds. And I had a notebook where each week I would sit down and I'd say, okay, I'm going to spend this much time on my sound. I'm going to spend 15 or 20 minutes a day on my sound. I'm going to spend 30 to 45 minutes on my technique. I'm going to spend 30 to 45 minutes on my vocabulary. I'm going to spend, about that much time, 30 to 45 minutes on tunes, and I'm going to spend about that much time on transcription. And that would come out to somewhere 3 hours to 4 hours, or sometimes even 5 hours, right? It's a lot of time. We don't, even if you really want to do this, to put that together, that might not be possible, right? Recognize that. But this was it was a time when I was very structured in my practicing, okay, for a small number of years. And that really paid off in a lot of ways. I mean, that created the foundation. I'm kind of coasting on that foundation now because I have a lot of other things I have to do in my work life that are not about playing the saxophone. So, it paid off to really put in the time on that foundation. Okay, so in this idea of freedom and discipline, you've probably heard it said, discipline leads to freedom, right? And so for me, that time in my life, really putting in the time, structuring my practicing and being very specific about what I was going to practice, I had a log that I created for myself. It was pre-computer days. I took a piece of paper and a ruler and I drew a grid, and it had 8 boxes horizontal and like 7 maybe going vertically. And it was like, okay, the left-hand column is this. These are my topics. These are my categories that I just gave to you. And then across the top, it's the days of the week. And then I do my sound, and I make a little note in the first box. I did this today. I do my technique. I make a little note. I did this at this tempo. I kept track of my tempos. And every day, I would try to, whatever tempo I played perfectly yesterday, I would play today, and then I would move it up 1 notch. And in those days, metronomes were kind of on an exponential scale. It's like 60, 63, 66, 69, 72, 76, 80, 84, 88. Not like today where you go up digitally by 1 point at a time, right? So nowadays you could do, say, 5 clicks on the metronome, whatever it is. But each day, my first thing is I'm going to do it perfectly, without any errors, with a great sound. I'm holding myself to a certain standard because that's how I want to play. Not that I want to play perfectly, but what I mean is if I'm going to achieve excellence, I like the word excellence rather than perfection. If I'm going to achieve excellence, I want to be able to play those scales without any errors, without any blips. It's even, rhythmically even. I'm playing with a great sound. So I had certain criteria in mind as I'm doing this. I've got my checklist. Am I playing with a great sound? Is the rhythm even? Are there any blips? Do I have any technical issues? Do I need to break this down? Right? And then I've got my tempo. And then each day I'm trying to move my tempo up 1 notch, right? And then at some point you hit a plateau, and you're like, okay, I can't make it go any faster, and I'm going to change to something else. And I had certain things that I had on my list, like, okay, the scales, full range up and down, scales and thirds, scales and fourths, diatonic triads, all these just basic technical things, keeping track, and then my goal is to play those at 400 someday, right? And I probably got my scales up to that, but not like scales and fourths. I don't think I ever could play my scales and fourths that fast. Okay, so that's the discipline part, which then leads to, when you go to play, all right, now that's available to you. You have the facility to get around on your instrument, right? And it will allow you to do things that you otherwise couldn't previously do because you don't have the facility. You've developed your sound in a way where then when you're improvising, you've got the sound. You're not losing the sound because you're thinking about improvising. That gives you that freedom. Okay, so that's really kind of a little background and overview, and I'm happy to get into the weeds on all that, but I want to talk about this, an approach to practicing ideas and developing ideas, okay? I want to get on that tack. And I want to go from, I'm going to start with something that's very structured, and then I want to talk about a way that I do this now that's less structured. And I guess to give you one more sort of global idea in terms of practicing and how we structure our time. This is where I could have started. We have time when we're practicing, we're doing specific things, very structured, like I've just been describing. Everything I've just described is like, okay, I know exactly what I'm playing, I know the tempo I want, I know the criteria I'm using to evaluate that. Great. So that's very structured practicing. On the other hand, it's good to have unstructured practice where you're just exploring, okay? You're in, I like to call it discovery mode, okay? And I'm going to talk more about discovery mode after I lay this heavy structure on you. And I'm going to do that because I hope that'll be liberating, because you know, sometimes I get into the heavy structure and then people are like, do I have to do all of that? You know? And the answer is, well, no, you don't have to, but if you do, you'll get results, right? And I guess that's a thing, like known results. I don't know if you've known, there's this book called Measure What Matters. Do any of you know this book called Measure What Matters? Okay, it's a business book, and they use these what they call OKR. O is outcomes. What are your outcomes? KR is known results. Or maybe O is objectives. Is O objectives? It's objectives, sorry. I'm thinking known results is outcomes. It could just be OO, objectives and outcomes. So you've got your objective, what am I trying to accomplish? And then what's your known result, right? And then you can see how those two things compare. I think it is important to do that in your practicing, because then you have a sense of your achievement, your accomplishment. Okay, so based on something that I learned from David Liebman, but also from David Baker. So David Baker, a great jazz pedagogue who taught at Indiana University, where I currently teach. He taught there for 50 years and was one of my primary mentors. David Liebman, great jazz saxophonist, who I would also consider a mentor in a way, even though I didn't study with him directly other than one private lesson. But this is a process that I call the etude process, okay? We think about what does the word etude mean? In French, it means study. Yeah, it's a study. So I call this the etude process because it's an approach to how we can work on vocabulary in a very specific way. And I use the word process, the etude process, because it's not just one step, although, you know, you might not want to do all the steps that I went through with it, because I took it to an extreme. That's what you'll find, though, with a lot of great, obviously, with a lot of great jazz players that are like, I just talked about myself, now I'm saying I'm a great jazz player. No, trumpet player from New Orleans.
There's a lot of
No. Oh, shoot. No. No. Younger guy. Anyway. Nicholas Payton, thank you. Nicholas Payton was hilarious. He's doing this clinic, and he's like, kind of like, well, I'm going to tell you this secret. You know, he's talking about learning Freddie Hubbard solos. It's like, well, I was kind of weird. You know, I would like actually imagine that I was Freddie Hubbard. I would try to become Freddie Hubbard. I'm like, that's not weird. That's actually the way to do it. You have to step into that person's experience, right? You become, I'm kind of going on a tangent here about transcribing. You become like an actor where you have to study that person and they're playing in a way where you are trying to step into their shoes, right? So what you will find is that a lot of players have gone to these kind of extremes in how they practice. And that's, I have kind of an extreme process with this etude process thing. Most of my students, I can't even get them through 2 steps. You know, they're like, yeah, okay, they give up. So it's very basic. This also ties in with David Baker. He had what he called the generic pattern. Okay, I heard somebody playing this earlier. You've got right? That's the short version of the generic pattern, and then there's the long version of the pattern. Right? Now, he never said this, he never verbalized this, but I was around him enough and you know, experienced other ways that he would do things that I came to realize. And then Liebman actually talked about this in a lesson where he meant that to be an example, right? He would make the students in his improvisation class play those patterns on the chord changes to every single tune. When I took his improvisation 1 class, 1 semester, we were required to learn 18 bebop tunes. 18 in 15 weeks. That's more than 1 a week, you know. And then we had to play the generic pattern on the chords to all those tunes. What he didn't say was, the reason he called it the generic pattern is, it's an example. Take other patterns, take other licks, take other things, and do the same thing and play them on, you know, over the changes in that way, right? And I kind of was able to extrapolate from something Liebman did and from what David was doing into what I came up with this etude process. Okay, so let me demonstrate the etude process, and then you can decide if you want to go down this crazy path. All right, I'm going to pick a tune. I mean, I'm thinking of Afternoon in Paris because it's sort of like an easy one to fit the model, because it's a bunch of 2/5s, right? But actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take Tune Up, because Tune Up has a problem that has to be solved. And the cool thing about this process is it forces you into some corners. When you have to solve a problem with the chord progression, you have to do some creative thinking. And the point about this is, you know, sometimes people get the wrong idea. They're like, oh, well, you're just playing patterns. That's not creative, right? Well, we can argue about that, but when you have a tune that doesn't move the way you expect it to, then you have to solve a problem. So I'm going to start, this is a Sonny Stitt thing that I often use. It's a very simple pattern. So, okay, and then I'm going to put an ending on it. I'm going to end with Clifford Brown. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So. Okay. So the first part I learned from Sonny Stitt. The last part I learned from Clifford Brown. The middle part is, I'm just making that up because it's based on the bebop scale. Okay, sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Sounds like jazz. Yeah, that's our goal. We want it to sound like jazz. Okay, so what I would do in my practicing is I would take that. I was going to use the saxophone as a microphone. Hello? Yeah. I would take that. Okay, my first step in the etude process, I'm going to play it everywhere possible. So I'm going to go through now, do any of you know the chords to tune up? Does anybody like have them memorized? Marlo's got it. Okay, I'm going to talk you through it real quick. Yeah, if you want to look, if you've got iReal Pro or something on your phone, you can look at it. I'll call concert pitch. So it's just 2-5-1, E minor, A7, D major. That's 4 measures. Then we go from the D and it becomes D minor, G7, C major. Then from that C, we do C minor, F7, B flat. And then the last 4 bars, E minor, to F7, which is weird. That's not a 2-5, right? We do E minor to F7. The F7 resolves to B flat, and then we go to A7. All right? So I think of the last 4 bars as a 2-5 sandwich, because the last 4 bars, the first chord is E minor, and the last measure is A7. That's a 2-5. But in the middle of it, you've got F7 to B flat. It's a totally different key. It doesn't make any sense. You know, who knows why? Okay, so then I'm going to go through and I'm going to do that in each of those keys. I played that. Okay, I changed the order of some of the notes. I had to fix that. Step 1 with any technical exercise, you're not playing in tempo. You're figuring things out. So right now I'm not concerned about playing in tempo. I just need to know what am I trying to do, and I'm going through and I'm figuring that out. What am I trying to do? The last 4 bars, I've got a problem because it's not 2-5-1. So now where is this going to take me? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a brainstorming process. This is what I would actually do when I'm practicing. I get to that point, I don't know what to do. And I'm starting to ask myself questions. Okay? Now, the most important question, the question that summarizes the entire creative process. That was good there, turned off. What could it be? There used to be a TV commercial. It was back in the days of like payphones. Guys driving down the highway in the middle of nowhere. He's in the middle of the desert. He works for one of the technology companies. I can't remember. It might have been Intel or somebody. And he's driving down the road and he passes this, little gas station. And he stops and he turns around and goes back and gets on the payphone and he calls up his work colleague. Like, hey, John, I've been thinking about that project we're working on. What if? Yeah, and then it would stop. That's it. And then it would say, at Intel, we're asking what if every day, right? Yeah. That's it. That's a 2-word summation of the creative process. Okay, so I'm asking myself the question, what if? So I have to go from E minor to F7, and I'm thinking about the shape that I played. My shape was that. Now, if I'm going to go to the concert F7, I could play that shape, but I have to go to a different note. Right? Then I'm asking myself, okay, that's cool. I'm on a chord tone. We all know the chord tones are important, right? And playing chord tones on the beat is how we hear the chord changes going by, so I'm being careful about that. Okay, could I play the shape that I played before? The other time I landed on the 3rd, and I went, okay, so can I play that shape but start on the 5th? That's a solution I didn't come up with the first time. That's solution number 2, and I just discovered something. I had an aha moment, and I went, oh, that was really cool. Because I played something that normally goes on the root. I played that from the 3rd, and I discovered it sounded better than I expected it. Although if somebody was playing chords, maybe I would be like, no, I'm going to check it on the piano. I'm off camera. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've just discovered something. That's like this bebop thing that you're supposed to play on the root, and I just played it on the 3rd, and it worked. Okay, so I've just done something creative. I just made a discovery. I'm excited, right? Like, honestly, maybe I've done that sometime before in my life, but it's not like That's not a textbook thing to do. That's not in the book, right? But I just found something that works. Okay, cool. So then I need to put the ending to it. Okay. Now a moment ago what I didn't go right there. I went. Oh, I did that. Okay, maybe I'll do that. Because I have a choice. I'm either going to have to repeat a note or not repeat a note. So maybe we'll have a vote. Okay, I'm going to play two ways. You all tell me which one you like better. Okay, that's solution number one. Oh, no. I've got the same problem. Okay, no vote. I'm going to do the solution number one. All right, so I just learned something. I've just learned something. Good. That's why we're trying to learn when we're practicing. Okay, so now I've got my plan. Oh, except for the chord changes. When it comes time for those last two notes, I'm not going to be on the same chord anymore. I have to adjust. But fortunately, the chord just moves down a half step, so I can go. Okay? Now this is a bit abstract because I'm not playing the chords on the piano, but when I play those two notes, I think you can hear how the chord changed. Okay, so here's the whole etude. I've now figured out my notes. Now my task, if I'm in the practice room, I probably put on a metronome, clicking on 2 and 4, right? I've got this going, and I'm going to try to play it in time without any errors. Oh, shoot. Now I messed up because I got to that last chord where it changes, and I was sort of, lulled into complacency, and I tried to play it the normal way. But okay. Okay, great. So then I would practice that. That's step one. Is like, I need to be able to do this idea everywhere possible. And on this tune, it happens to involve pretty much every measure of the tune, right? There are other tunes where it wouldn't be every measure. If I was going to do this on Cherokee, for example, and I would be happy to if you want to hear that, then there might be a couple places where I wouldn't be able to play that material. Although Cherokee, probably, I could do it most places. But other tunes, there might be moments where I wasn't playing that specific idea. Okay, the next step that I go through, what I consider step 2, I'm going to play that idea every other place that I possibly can. Now, tune-up is a very nice, neat example because it's 16 measures. You got 4 measures, 4 measures, 4 measures, and 4 measures. So I'm going to play it in the first 4 bars. I'm going to improvise in the next 4 bars. Then I'm going to play it in the third 4 bars, and then I'm going to improvise in the last 4 bars. Okay? So there's an element of freedom here. Now, this starts to exemplify what I'm talking about, freedom and discipline. The discipline is I must play this idea in measure 1 and in measure 9. And then I'm able to improvise everywhere else. The challenge is to be able to do both of those things and not get thrown off track. So, aside from a sticky key, I would give myself 80% on the second try, And in my world, when I'm practicing, oh, thank you. 80%, you're going to apply for that? Yeah. I'm pretty strict with myself. I would keep doing it, and I will set a bar. And this is something that we can do with our technical things, with anything. We're talking about developing habit. Habit is something that happens without thinking about it. And that means repetition. Repetition is the mother of skill. So I'm not going to just be satisfied to have done that twice and gotten it 80% on the second try. I'm going to be like, nope, I did not match the criteria that I set for myself, which was to do that without errors. And I would practice it until I could do, like 3 choruses in a row without making mistakes. And then I probably would go further, because my next goal with this is I want to start to weave together what I'm doing when I'm improvising. So I've got measures 1 through 4. I'm not quote unquote improvising, right? Measures 5 through 8, I am improvising. At least I'm not pre-planning what I'm going to play. Well, can I weave that together where I would not stop in between? The easy thing to do is play this, leave some space, play that, leave some space, play this, leave some space. So this time I'm going to try to weave them together. To do that, I have to think about how could I lead into the idea. So instead of starting, I'm going to have to go, okay, and I might think about that as like a prefix. Right? I've got a word, and I'm going to put a prefix in front of that word. I also want to think about, can I extend the idea beyond, instead of wherever that would go. So I'm going to try to lead into that line and try to lead out of that line in order to weave it into the improvised parts. 1, 2. Oh, okay. So where I was right there, I recognized I couldn't get to where I wanted to be, right? I went, I'm trying to connect it, and I didn't succeed. So then it's like, okay, back to the drawing board. I gotta figure out how to get there, right? So let me pause for a second and ask, like, are there questions about what I'm doing here, or what I'm talking about, or clarifications, or what? What do you think about this? This is crazy. Who would want to spend their time doing this? Or, yeah.
All right. So can you connect this process with in the moment on stage?
Yeah, in the moment on stage. How does this connect? So I was looking for this great Charlie Poker quote, and as things are on the internet, you'll find variations on this that I'm pretty sure he didn't say. But it's kind of you learn all that stuff and then you just forget about it and play. So when it comes time to play, and I'm gonna tie this in with something else I wanted to talk about. The discipline part is preparation, okay? We all have moments in life where we know we need to be prepared, and we do the preparation so that things will go well in the moment, right? We plan ahead, we make lists, we do whatever we need to do, and then then in the moment, boom, okay, great. So there are different levels, different ways to prepare for performance, right? And you will find evidence of how players prepared. There's a great example is Fats Navarro on Lady Bird. That session, it was a Tad Dameron, I think Tad Dameron's on piano on that session with Sonny Rollins when he's like, 17 years old or something, he's really young, 18. And there are alternate takes of those tunes. And discover that Fats Navarro, trumpet player, if you're not aware of Fats Navarro, you got to check out Fats Navarro. There are some recordings, like radio recordings with Charlie Parker, and man, what a great player. Died at a very young age of tuberculosis. He plays kind of the same stuff from one take to the next, right? And then you realize, oh, he has a plan. He came to the studio, they're gonna play this tune, and when he gets to this place, like he plays the turnaround. You know, I can't remember exactly what he played, but he plays the same thing on 2 different takes. There are other elements of different takes where he plays the exact same. In fact, I think he quotes Turkey in the Straw on more than one quote, or one take. So then you know, he prepared for that. J.J. Johnson, who, David Baker was close to J.J. David said J.J. would sometimes write out the beginning of his solo because he wanted to make sure that he came out of the gate with a really strong idea, and then that would be a springboard from there. For me, there are times when and this is the other part of what I want to talk about, is like preparing for performance when it really matters. Like, not that it doesn't matter, but sometimes it's just casual. You're like, oh, it's just a jam session, just get them to play, whatever, it doesn't matter. Other times, this is a recording session. This recording is going to be distributed around the world. You want to play well, okay? And I'll give you a very specific example. So a few years ago, there's a big band that I play with that's based out of Indianapolis called the Bucelli-Wallerab Jazz Orchestra. And we were doing a recording of music by David Baker, or arrangements. Most of them are his original compositions, but it happened to be, there's an arrangement on bebop. You know this tune, Dizzy Gillespie? Right? Right? It's really fast. I've never been good at playing fast tempos. I mean, I'm old enough that I can admit that now. I don't like playing fast tempos, right? And there's a tenor player named Ralph Bowen who now teaches at Rutgers. Ralph is a monster tenor player, and he's one of the great practicers of all time. I mean, his practice regimen. So when I was a freshman at Indiana University, Ralph was there as an artist diploma student, very first jazz artist diploma student ever, which was a special category that they created for someone who was seen as, probably going on to an international solo career in music. The other person who was an artist diploma student at that time was Joshua Bell, the great violinist. If you don't know either of them, then you should check them out because they're both extraordinary musicians. And Ralph would practice for 8 hours a day. And I'm not kidding you, like, I was sitting in the lounge doing my homework, doing my theory homework, whatever. And Ralph is across the hall and he's practicing. And he's playing this like 2-5-1 lick, and he's playing it in one key over and over at the same tempo. And it was perfect the first time he played it. And he's repeating it for 30 minutes. I'm not kidding. He plays hockey, and he said for him, practicing is like the way hockey players practice. You go to the blue line, and you have your bucket of pucks, and you put the puck down, you hit your slap shot into the net, put the puck on the ground, hit your slap shot into the net. You're just practicing slap shots. That's how he practices. Just do it again. Perfectly, every time. 30 minutes later, he's doing the same thing. Like, wow, amazing. So Ralph, the very first time that chart on bebop was played at Indiana University, Ralph was the tenor soloist. And there's a break, and it's 8 measures long. And I don't know if you've had the joy of playing a break, but the whole band stops, and it's you. You got to play something in that space, and if you get nervous, you're going to mess up the time, and then maybe the band doesn't come in right, and everything falls apart, right? And if that break is usually 2 measures, sometimes it's 4 measures. This break is 8 measures long at a very fast tempo. And so we're going into this recording session, and my buddy Brent's like, yeah, man, I want you to play a solo on bebop. And I'm like, I don't want to play a solo on bebop. Like, I'm going to have to play that break. So you know what I did? Well, I practiced. But also, I brainstormed, and I started writing down ideas. And then eventually that formulated into, I wrote out the whole 8-bar break. Because I'm not leaving anything to chance. We have a way of saying when you play badly, we say you folded, right? I have folded on recording sessions, long time ago, and that will haunt me for the rest of my life. If it's a recording session, I'm going to come prepared, right? I want to know what I'm doing. I don't want to leave too much to chance. And so I wrote out that 8 bars. But then what I did was when we did our little sound check, I played something else on the break. And then when the red light's on, I came out with my break. Like, boom! And everybody's like, wow, man, that break was amazing. Like, oh, thank you. I appreciate that. You want to do another take? No, I'm good. So sometimes we prepare for the performance when it's high stakes, and we do that. Now, another way that I do this is that I will, I'll give you another example. So Lynn Seaton, great bass player, teaches down in North Texas. He was coming to Bloomington for the International Society of Bassists, and he had a slot on the evening concert. And at these conferences, the evening concert is the big deal. Now, at that conference, they usually have like 3 different acts, and one of the people who was on the bill that week was Ron Carter, right? So that's some heavy people at this conference. And so Lynn's got a set. He asks me and some other people to play. And here's what I would like to do. And he's got rhythm changes at quarter note equals 350, something like that. And I'm like, as much as I don't like playing bebop, I don't like playing rhythm changes. And I really don't like playing at fast tempos like that. And I'm like, okay, so I'm going to practice for this. And what I did, and this is where the freedom part comes in, so I'm going to, because I'll use up all my time here. What I will often do nowadays, so in the old days, I went through a period of years with that really incredibly structured, very rigorous approach where it's like, I'm taking this idea and I'm putting it through these chord changes. That's how I really learned to play chord changes, right? And then to go beyond that, earlier I said something about vocabulary, and I said, well, yeah, I'm not going to go deep into that, but here's how my mind works. I'm like, okay, so I need to be able to play short 2-5-1s in major. I need to be able to play long 2-5-1s in major. I need to be able to play short 2-5-1s in minor. I need to be able to play long 2-5-1s in minor. I need to be able to play major chord ideas where it's a 1 chord. I need to be able to play minor where it's a 1 chord. I need to have ideas for that. And that's different. We start from Dorian. Like if it's a minor chord, start from Dorian. But when the minor chord is a 1 chord, it's more flexible. We can use melodic minor, the ascending melodic minor, jazz melodic minor, if we call that, right? And this was something my teacher, David Baker, did not emphasize very much. And I sort of discovered it through transcribing Charlie Parker's solo on bebop. When I transcribed his solo on bebop, then it was like, oh, I need to learn how to play in minor keys. And then I noticed what he was doing. Like, oh, that doesn't fit what I learned in improvisation class. Oh, he's doing melodic minor. Okay, then I need to be able to play things that use the diminished whole tone sound, the altered dominant 7 sharp 9 sharp 5. I need to be able to play things that use the Lydian dominant sound. I need to be able to play. So I like literally all these categories in my mind, and then it's like a treasure hunt. Like, okay, here's something that uses that sound. Okay, I'm going to learn that because that unlocks that particular sound, right? And then, I'm figuring out how to put all this stuff together. So I went through that period of time, which was very intensely involved in that kind of treasure hunt, sort of thing, and learning vocabulary. Now, that stuff is all available, right? So I don't need to learn how to play over a dominant 7 sharp 9 sharp 5 chord right now. I just need to know, like if I'm going to play this tune, what's going to sound good, right? What can I do with the things I already know? So the way that I prepare now, and this example of I need to play rhythm changes at quarter note equals 350. Okay, so each day I would play through some melodies that were rhythm changes melodies, you know, anthropology, dexterity, and there's the one, is it We? Right? And there was another one that sometimes you're improvising, these things come out because you've heard them before, and you're like, oh yeah, that's another melody. So I would play those things just to activate my ear in the direction of what sounds good on rhythm changes. And then I would just improvise. And so this is kind of a freedom in practicing where it's a little bit unstructured, but then I'll bring some structure into it by what I do. So I'll start playing. And maybe I play something I like when I went, I mean, I don't think I've ever done that before. I'm happy with that. I'm like, oh, I like that. I might write that down, right? And then, so I might make a note of that. So tomorrow when I come back, I had that cool idea yesterday. What was it? I probably won't remember, but then I have a little note from oh yeah, in this place on this, that sounded really good. All right, cool. I get to the bridge. There, and I didn't play what I wanted to play. So this is another thing that I will do when I practice now. So I played, although what came out sounded good, so I probably don't need to throw it away, but my fingers kind of bobbled, and that bothered me. Like there was tension in my body, right? In that moment when I went, oh, I didn't, whoops, and then it was like, oh, it came out okay, cool. But I don't want to have that tension, right? So I'm going to go back. I played. But I meant to play. Okay, so I might stop myself in the moment and correct myself, right? Because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to play what I hear. And how am I going to play what I hear if I keep accidentally playing what I didn't hear? So that's how I will practice. There's a wonderful quotation that I love that relates to this. It's from a book. You remember back in the 80s, it was all about right and left brain, right? Okay, this book is called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. Okay, it's a drawing book. And there's a wonderful sentence in that book. In drawing, everything is a recovery from the first line. You start going here like, whoops, I'm a little bit too far this way. Okay, go back. Whoops, okay, not too far. Okay. You're constantly correcting, right? To get it to happen. So I will use this process in my practicing of like, stop, correct, do what I was trying to hear. Or if I get into the middle of an idea and I don't know where it wants to go and I'm not hearing it, and then I'm like the idea sort of fizzles out because I didn't have a clear sense of where it should go, I'll back up and I'll start again. Kind of like what I did in that etude when I went, and I was like, oh, wait a minute, what's going to sound good, right? And I'll try some different things out till I find something I like. And when I find something I like, then okay, now I'm going to go on. But this process of actually stopping myself to sort of self-correct in order to then encourage like playing what I heard or hearing something that I wasn't, that I didn't get to the first time, right? So that's a more free way of practicing. You know, and I'll do it where obviously I'm not keeping time all the way through because I've stopped myself, right? Then at some point I'm going to say, okay, no, okay, you can't stop yourself, right? And so after a few days practicing this rhythm, you know, for this concert where I was going to play rhythm changes, okay, now I've got some ideas I've written down. And these ideas range from quotation, where it's like, oh, I could quote we. Okay, that's cool, I like that. To colors that I might use, like, oh, I could use whole tone on the bridge, right? It may be just a very general thought, like that. Or it might be specific, like I have something I like to do. You know, maybe it's a very specifically formed idea, but it could just be very general. Oh, I like the idea of whole tone. All right, somewhere I'll use whole tone on the bridge. And then maybe there's a chord substitution or something else. Or a rhythm. Like maybe I'm like, oh yeah, I want to play a hemiola rhythm because that's going to create tension. And I came up with this idea, you know, like, okay, that's easy. I could do that fast, right? So I came up with something I guaranteed I can play. Okay, cool. Now I've got those ideas, right? And then what I'll do is I'll just improvise, but I'm going to stay open to the opportunities to use those ideas. So now there's some direction, and I'm using the word direction here to mean it's directed. Like, here's a great way to express it. So the tenor player, Donnie McCaslin, gave a clinic I saw once, and he had the most beautiful way of saying this. Because, you know, the question people ask, what are you thinking about while you're improvising? Right? I'm not thinking about anything. Right? Okay, thank you. I'll try that. He said, I'm aware of the field of possibilities, right? I'm seeing the field of possibilities. So what I just described was my practicing was leading me to bring forth possibilities. And I was intentional enough about wanting to remember some of them, you know, in the sense that you might make notes when you're going to give a talk, or you might make an outline, whatever. Okay, I could do that whole tone thing on the bridge. I could do this quotation on the A section. I could play that chord substitution there. I could play this hemiola here. Okay, that's in the field of possibilities. In the actual performance, those things may or may not happen. I'm not going to force it, okay? And I think this is where there's kind of a balance between the freedom and the discipline, right? And it does go back to that Charlie Parker quote, which is like, learn all that stuff and then forget about it and just play. Where in that recording session, I'm going to play that 8-bar break, 100%. I'm not leaving anything to chance. That's set. I don't even care if people know that I wrote it down and I practiced it. I'll be like, you know, I want to sound good. And you want me to sound good too, because it's not just my record, it's your record, you know. Okay, cool. And so we have, you know, that range from I'm going to predetermine something I'm going to do to I'm going to come up with ideas and to like, oh, I didn't prepare at all, I just showed up and I just drew upon whatever experience that I have, right? So it's a range that happens, and it just depends on the situation. How much do you want to prepare for that, with that? But the most important thing is, it's like, I mean, another analogy would be like, your practicing is like putting money in the bank, you know? Like, okay, I did that work. That's available to me if I need it, right? If I want to use it, it's going to be there for me. And I think the challenge for each of us, I mean, it continues to be a challenge, like whatever level you're at, it's that thing of like, well, what should I practice? I don't know. But again, coming back to the ideas and developing ideas, okay, yeah, all right. Well, guess that brings up a question. Where do ideas come from? Right? If I'm going to learn ideas and practice ideas, whatever, practice ideas and then develop ideas, where do ideas come from? Well, where do they come from? What do you all think? Copying? Okay, so copying would be, it's coming from somebody else. Like it's, oh, here's the Charlie Parker thing where I said this came from Clifford Brown, right? This came from Sonny Stitt. Okay, I'm going to use that idea that Sonny Stitt played because I know it sounds good. And then I'm going to use this Clifford Brown thing. Yeah, where else do ideas come from?
What we listen to or our musical inspiration.
Okay, what you listen to and your musical inspiration. And that sometimes comes up in, unexpected ways, like, yeah, you find yourself playing a quotation, because it's just something you heard and it was in there. And that's, I think of creativity in a way is like you're making a soup, right? You're making a nice vegetable soup, and you got your water, and you put the potatoes in, you put in some tomatoes and green beans and carrots and whatever. And then, you can see some of that on the surface, but it's not all there. And so we learn things, and at first it's on the surface, but eventually it goes below the water line. You're not necessarily seeing it; it's in your subconscious, right? And then when you're in the act of doing something creative, things will come up from your subconscious mind. They surface. Like, oh, there's a potato. Oh, nice. Oh, there's a green bean. Oh, I like green beans. And so it's similar to that, where things go into your subconscious and then they come up like that. Yeah. Anybody ever have another? This could become a guess what I'm thinking question. I'm thinking of even somewhere else. Where do ideas come from? Yeah.
Accidents.
Accidents. Yeah, they do come from accidents. That's for sure. Yeah. And the other thing is, we can develop ideas from principles or concepts. And this is the other part of what I described, what I call the etude process, is very specific. Like, okay, here is this very specific line, and I'm going to use that exactly this way. And it's like, succeed or fail, right? It sounds pretty heavy. Like, oh, how disappointing. I didn't play my 2-5 lick the way that I practiced it. Now I have failed. We don't want to necessarily have that feeling. So an example of a concept. Well, approaching things from rhythm. I did want to talk about rhythm a little bit today. So there are sort of bigger ways we can think about things. One of them I want to mention is phrasing. Phrasing is one of these words that's kind of hard to pin down. It's like, what do you mean by phrasing? In classical playing, it could mean what articulations do you choose to use, right? But in general, it means how you shape things. And so in jazz, an important element of phrasing is when do you play and when do you rest, right? And there's an exercise, a play rest exercise where play for 2 bars, rest for 2 bars. Have any of you done that exercise before? Play for 2, rest for 2? Yeah, I mean that's a great exercise. Now, what I have noticed, now I'm going to go, this is going deep, right? I will often say to students who are playing pretty well, but it's just in terms of how you organize your thoughts. Play the form of the tune. You need to play the form. And Evan's back there nodding his head. He knows what I'm talking about because he's a drummer, right? Now, if I'm playing on a blues, I might do this. From a drummer's perspective. You were just grooving. You're like, yeah. Okay, what I did on the first chorus is I left space at the end of every 4 measures. notice I'm singing pitches too. Like practice singing accurate pitches and hitting all the nuances of the chord changes. But I'm purposely leaving space there. Why? Because the drummer can go in that spot. He's like, hey man, how you doing? All right. Yeah, cool. So did you see the other day? So that's phrasing. We can that could be that's an idea. Like, okay, I'm gonna leave space every 4 bars. I'm gonna see what the drummer does. See if the drummer's paying attention, right? And then the drummer notices you left space, and they're like, oh wait, you want to hear from me? Okay. That's a bing, right? They'll do a little. They'll pick up on that. Or it might be like, I'm going to play a provocative rhythm, and then leave some space and see what happens. And if I go ba boo ba dee ba doo ba, and the drummer might go ah ah ah, right? And then I go ba doo ba dee ba doo dee da, get to boom, ba da da dee ba doo dee doo da, boo dee boo ba boo 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 beep ba boo beep ba ba ba. You know, if you start playing those offbeats, the drummers will be like, oh, I like playing offbeats too. You know, pretty soon you're doing that together. So that's also a form of discipline while you're playing, like just being aware of, again, the field of possibilities, which is not just 2-5-1, but it's like, oh, I can do these rhythmic things that are engaging the rhythm section. It doesn't tell you which notes you're supposed to play. It's a rhythm. You can put whatever notes you want to it, right? So there are these kind of conceptual things which also then can become the genesis of ideas, okay? I'll give you one more, then we'll quit. We need to study melodies. We also need to study rhythms. And when you study melodies, you start to notice, I'm going to play later today, Like Someone in Love. Melodies have a certain contour that comes from what I call structural pitches. So you notice this melody, they go boo 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 doo dee 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 da da. So we went da 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 and then da da dee 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 dee. It's gradually working its way up. So another discipline is keeping track of what was the highest note that I played, or using these structural pitches. And if I say, okay, I'm going to improvise on that tune and I'm going to use those pitches. So. Now, it's pretty obvious about it, but if you work with that and you practice that, you can get to where it's very subtle, and nobody will know that you're doing it, but they'll smile. And they'll be like, yeah, that sounded really good. You go transcribe Stan Getz on Like Someone in Love with Kenny Barron, and check out how he does this. It's not that he's necessarily playing the notes from the melody, but I don't remember the solo off the top of my head, but something like this, where you would just sort of have a line and keep track of where you went to, and then go a little higher, and then go a little higher. So I worked my way up the horn, and as you go higher, it creates tension. And then you notice when I came down that scale, and it felt like, I mean, literally, we were up here, and then we went, oh, okay. You know, it's like, don't go any higher, please. The alto is too whiny. I don't want to hear that. No. But, so, you know, that's the level on which we can go in terms of, you know, that's way beyond like, oh, this scale goes with this chord kind of thing. Like, there are a lot of conceptual things once you have the nuts and bolts in place. It literally is, what do you want to build, right? And then not only oh, I'm gonna build a shed, but like, what style do you want it to be in? What, you know, where's the window gonna go? What, all the different, you could do creative things with it, right? So, going back, you know, maybe to come up with a punchline for the theme of freedom and discipline, I see it as a dialectical process, okay? I mentioned the idea that, okay, some practicing is going to be structured and some practice is going to be discovery mode or exploration. What I do is I will explore, at this point, this is different. I mean, you have to have something to work with. So in the beginning it was just like, okay, I'm going to practice this stuff in 12 keys. You know, I'm going to practice this etude process. But then now it's, okay, I'm going to play and I'm going to see what comes out where I go, ooh, that was a really nice idea. I want to capture that idea. Okay, in the beginning it was free. I'm brainstorming, I'm just playing. It's open, and whatever happens, happens, fine. But then I catch something like, ooh, okay, I'm going to move that over. Now I'm going to be disciplined, and now I practice that, right? And you spend time on that. Okay, then you go back to the free space. Okay, I'm just exploring and brainstorming what comes up. Ooh, I like that idea, cool. Now I'm going to move that over to the structured practicing, and I'm going to practice it, right? And you keep going back and forth between the structured and the unstructured. And that, you know, can help you. It's a creative practice. And that is the creative practice right there. What I've just described is the creative process. What if I take this idea and I do this with it? And that's the development.